I found the photograph on a Thursday evening in late March, tucked inside an old leather Bible that had been sitting on my mother's bookshelf for longer than I could remember. It was not supposed to be there. The photograph, I mean. It was of my daughter Lauren when she was maybe 16 or 17 years old, standing in our backyard near the magnolia tree, smiling but not quite looking at the camera. Someone had written a date on the back in pencil. The handwriting was my mother's. The date was 10 years ago. I did not understand why that photograph would be inside that Bible. I did not understand why the date mattered. But when I looked at it, something in my chest tightened, and I felt the way you feel when you walk into a room and realize a conversation stopped the moment you arrived. This is not a news report. This is a story about what happened when my daughter finally told me the truth. It is a story about family silence, about the people we trust without question, and about what happens when you realize that the person you thought held your family together was actually the one who let it crack in the most painful places. Some of the names and details are part of the telling, but the feelings behind it are things many families will recognize. I am sharing this because sometimes a story can help us see a warning sign we might have missed in our own lives. My name is Helen Louise Whitaker. I was born Helen Louise Carver in 1948 in Durham, North Carolina, and I have lived most of my life right here in Chapel Hill. My husband Robert passed away 6 years ago this coming July, and since then, I have lived alone in the house we bought together in 1976. It is a modest brick house on Willow Bend Crossing with a front porch that catches the morning sun and a kitchen window that looks out over a small garden I can no longer keep as tidy as I used to. My knees do not bend the way they once did, and my hands shake a little when I try to thread a needle or peel an apple, but I manage. I raised 3 children in this house. My oldest son, Michael, lives in Virginia now with his wife and 2 grown boys. My middle child, a daughter named Catherine, moved to Oregon after college and calls me every Sunday evening like clockwork. And then there is Lauren, my youngest. 27 years old now, though in my mind she is still the girl who used to sit cross-legged on the living room floor, sorting through my button jar, holding each one up to the light like it was a precious stone. Lauren has always been different from her siblings, quieter, more watchful. She does not fill silence the way Catherine does, and she does not joke the way Michael does. When she was little, people used to say she was shy, but I never thought that was the right word. She was not afraid of people. She was just careful about what she let them see. She lives about 20 minutes from me now, in a small apartment near the university, where she works as a research assistant in the psychology department. She comes by once or twice a week, usually on Wednesdays after work, and sometimes on Saturday mornings. We sit at the kitchen table and drink coffee, and she tells me about her students or the research study she is helping with, and I tell her about the new recipes I am trying or the birds I saw at the feeder that morning. It is comfortable. It is easy, or at least it used to be. Before I go any further, I need to take a breath here. Telling this kind of story is not easy, even when it is told to help somebody. If you are still with me, would you do this old woman a kindness and tell me where you are watching from? What city? What state? And what time it is there? I like knowing I am not sitting alone with these memories. If this story is touching something in you, leave a like. Subscribe if you want another story tomorrow, because there is one here every day. Now let me go back to that afternoon. My mother Dorothy has lived with me for the past 4 years, ever since she had a bad fall in her own home, and we all agreed she could not manage alone anymore. She is 94 years old now, sharp as a tack in some ways, and frustratingly forgetful in others. She has her own room at the end of the hallway, the one that used to be Michael's, and she spends most of her time in there reading her Bible, watching old westerns on the television, or sitting by the window watching the street. She does not complain much, but she does not say much either. She has always been a woman of few words, and age has only made her quieter. My mother raised me to believe that family loyalty was sacred. You did not air your troubles outside the home. You did not question your elders. You did not make a fuss. When I was growing up, if something bothered you, you were expected to pray about it, handle it yourself, or let it go. That was just how it was. My father worked long hours at the textile mill, and my mother ran the house with an iron hand wrapped in a soft voice. She was not cruel, but she was firm. She expected respect, and she got it. I learned early that her word was law. If she said something was fine, it was fine. If she said something did not need discussing, you did not discuss it. I carried that into my own adulthood. I raised my children the same way, though I tried to be a little softer, a little warmer. I wanted them to feel they could talk to me, and I thought they did. But looking back now, I wonder if I was only hearing what I wanted to hear. Lauren started pulling away from family gatherings about 10 years ago. She was 17 then, just finishing high school. At first, I thought it was normal teenage moodiness. She stopped coming to Sunday dinners at my mother's house. She stopped staying overnight when we visited. She would make excuses. She had homework, she had a headache, she had plans with friends. I did not push. I thought she just needed space. Then she went off to college, and the distance became easier to explain. She was busy, she was growing up, she was finding herself. That is what young people do, I told myself. Catherine had done the same thing. Michael had done the same thing. It was normal. But there were other things. Small things. Things I noticed but did not name. Lauren stopped calling my mother on her birthday. She stopped sending cards at Christmas. When my mother moved in with me, Lauren came by less often. She was polite when she did visit, but she never stayed long, and she never sat in the same room as my mother if she could help it. She would make tea in the kitchen and stand by the counter. She would say she needed to leave early. She would text me instead of calling, as if she was checking to make sure my mother was not around before she came over. I asked her once if something was wrong. She said no. She said she was just tired. She said she loved me, and I believed her because I wanted to. I want to pause right here because this is the part I wish more families understood. A small change is not always small. Sometimes it is the only language a hurting person has left. If you know what I mean, tell me in the comments where you are listening from tonight. And if someone you love needs a reminder to pay attention, share this with them. Subscribe if you want to sit with me again tomorrow. I have more stories to tell, and every one of them carries a lesson. The night Lauren called me and asked if she could come over, I knew something was different. It was a Tuesday evening in early March, and she did not usually visit on Tuesdays. Her voice on the phone was steady, but there was something underneath it, something careful. She said she needed to talk to me. She said it was important. She said she needed me to be alone. I told my mother I was going to take a walk and that I would be back in a little while. She nodded without looking up from her television program. I met Lauren on the front porch. The air was cool, and the sky was that pale purple color it gets right before dark. She was wearing an old gray sweater I had given her years ago, the sleeves pulled down over her hands. She was not crying, but her eyes were red, like she had been. We sat down in the wicker chairs, the ones Robert built when Lauren was just a baby. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. I could hear the wind moving through the trees and a dog barking somewhere down the street. Finally, Lauren took a deep breath and said, "Mom, I need you to promise me you will not try to fix this in your head like you always do." I did not understand what she meant, but I nodded. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and she said, "I am going to tell you something that is going to hurt. And before I tell you what happened, I need you to know that you were not the first person I told. I told someone else a long time ago, someone I thought I could trust, someone who was supposed to protect me, and she did not." My heart started beating faster. I asked her who. I asked her what she was talking about. But she shook her head and said, "Just listen. Please, just listen." And then she told me. She said that when she was 16 years old, something happened. She did not give me all the details, and I am grateful for that, because I do not think I could have borne them. What she did tell me was that it involved someone in our family, someone older, someone I trusted, someone who violated a boundary that should never have been crossed. She said that after it happened, she was terrified. She did not know what to do. She did not know who to tell. She was afraid no one would believe her. She was afraid she would be blamed. She was afraid the family would fall apart. But she could not carry it alone. So she told the one person she thought would understand. The one person she thought would protect her without question. She told my mother. I felt the air leave my lungs. I said, "What?" Lauren nodded. She said, "I told Grandma Dorothy. I told her everything. I told her I was scared. I told her I did not know what to do. And you know what she said to me, Mom?" I could not speak. Lauren's voice cracked, but she kept going. She said Grandma looked at me and said it was my fault. She said I must have done something to encourage it. She said I was too pretty for my own good. She said if I told anyone else, it would destroy the family. She said I needed to forgive and forget because that is what good Christian girls do. I felt like I was falling, like the porch was tilting underneath me. I said no. I said, that cannot be true. I said, she would never. But Lauren just looked at me with those tired, knowing eyes and said, "She did, Mom." And that is not even the worst part. The worst part, she said, was what my mother did after that conversation. Nothing. She did nothing. She did not check on Lauren. She did not ask how she was doing. She did not warn the person who had hurt her. She did not tell me. She did not tell Robert. She did not call a counselor or a pastor or anyone. She just went on as if the conversation had never happened. As if my daughter had never sat in her kitchen and begged for help. Lauren said she saw me every Sunday after that. She watched me stop eating. She watched me stop talking. She watched me pull away from everyone. And she never once asked if I was okay. She just kept acting like everything was fine, like I was the one being difficult, like I was the problem. I want to stop here for a moment because I know some of you listening might be feeling what I felt in that moment. Disbelief, denial, the need to defend someone you have loved your whole life. I understand that, but I am asking you to stay with me. Because what I learned that night changed everything I thought I knew about protection, about loyalty, and about what it really means to love someone. Thank you for staying with me this far. I know this is heavy, but I promise I am not telling it to leave you in the dark. I am telling it because somebody out there may need courage or patience or the reminder that love must sometimes ask difficult questions. If this is helping you, leave a like. Tell me what time it is where you are. Morning, afternoon, or the middle of the night. I read those comments like postcards from people I may never meet, but still care about. Lauren sat there on that porch, her hands folded in her lap, and she did not cry. She just looked at me with this exhausted kind of calm, like she had been carrying a weight for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. And I realized in that moment that I had failed her, not because I had known and done nothing, but because I had not known at all, because I had been so busy protecting the image of my family that I had not seen my own daughter disappearing right in front of me. I asked her why she was telling me now. Why, after all these years, she had decided to break the silence. She said, "Because Grandma is living in your house, Mom. And every time I come over and see her sitting in that chair like she is some kind of saint, I feel like I am going to lose my mind. I cannot keep pretending. I cannot keep protecting her. And I cannot keep protecting you from the truth." I did not know what to say. I felt like my entire foundation had cracked. My mother, the woman who taught me how to pray, the woman who taught me how to cook, the woman who held me when my father died and told me that everything would be all right. That woman had looked my daughter in the eye and told her that her pain was her own fault. Lauren stood up to leave. She said, "I am not asking you to kick her out. I am not asking you to hate her. I am just asking you to see her, really see her, and then decide who you want to protect." She walked down the porch steps and got into her car, and I watched her drive away. I sat there in the dark for a long time, listening to the night sounds and trying to make sense of what I had just heard. Eventually, I went back inside. My mother was still in her chair, still watching her television. She looked up at me and asked if I had a nice walk. I said yes, and I hated myself for it. I did not sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every family dinner, every holiday, every Sunday afternoon I had spent with my mother and my daughter in the same room. I kept asking myself how I had missed it, how I had not seen the way Lauren's face changed when my mother walked into a room, how I had not noticed the way she found reasons to leave early, to sit far away, to avoid being alone with her grandmother. But the truth is, I had seen it. I just had not wanted to understand what I was seeing. I grew up in a time and a place where you did not question your elders. My mother was the kind of woman who commanded respect simply by walking into a room. She was not loud. She was not harsh. But there was a firmness to her, a kind of quiet authority that made you think twice before challenging her. When she said something, that was the end of the discussion. And if you had a problem with that, well, you learned to keep it to yourself. My father was a textile worker at the old Irwin Mill in Durham. He worked long hours, 6 days a week, and when he came home, he was too tired to do much more than eat supper and fall asleep in his chair. My mother ran the house. She cooked. She cleaned. She managed the money. She raised me and my 2 brothers with what she called a firm hand and a soft heart. But I am not sure the heart was ever as soft as she claimed. I remember once when I was about 12 years old, I came home from school crying because a group of girls had been cruel to me. They had said I was ugly. They had said no boy would ever like me. I ran into the kitchen and told my mother what had happened, expecting comfort, expecting her to tell me those girls were wrong. But instead, she looked at me and said, "Well, maybe if you spent less time feeling sorry for yourself and more time fixing your hair, they would not have a reason to say such things." I was stunned. I remember standing there in the kitchen, tears still wet on my face, and feeling like I had been slapped. But I did not argue. I just went to my room and cried quietly into my pillow, because crying loudly would have been making a fuss, and making a fuss was not allowed. I carried that moment with me for years. I told myself my mother was just trying to toughen me up, that she was preparing me for a world that would not always be kind, that she loved me, even if she did not always show it in the way I needed. And maybe that was true. But it was also true that I learned very early that my feelings were not as important as keeping the peace. When I got married to Robert, my mother told me that a good wife does not complain. She said that a man works hard, and the last thing he needs when he comes home is a woman nagging him about every little thing. She said marriage is about compromise, and compromise means knowing when to keep your mouth shut. I took that advice to heart. And for the most part, it worked. Robert and I had a good marriage. We loved each other. We built a life together. But there were times when I swallowed things I should have said out loud. Times when I let resentment build because I thought silence was the same as strength. I want to pause here because I think this is something many women of my generation can understand. We were taught that keeping the peace was our job, that protecting the family meant protecting its image, even if that image was not entirely true. And we carried that teaching into every relationship we had, with our husbands, with our children, with our parents. We learned to smooth over the rough edges, to make excuses, to say everything was fine when it was not. But what I did not understand until that night on the porch with Lauren was that sometimes keeping the peace is just another way of keeping secrets. Before I tell you what I did next, I want you to remember this. Concern is not the same as accusation. Paying attention is not the same as judging. If you have ever been called dramatic when you were simply worried, write the word "listen" in the comments. And if you have not subscribed yet, I would be grateful if you did. There is a new story every day, and maybe tomorrow's story will reach someone right when they need it. The morning after Lauren told me the truth, I woke up with a plan. I was going to talk to my mother. I was going to ask her directly if what Lauren had said was true. I was going to give her a chance to explain. Maybe there had been a misunderstanding. Maybe Lauren had misremembered. Maybe my mother had been trying to protect her in some misguided way and it had come out wrong. But even as I told myself these things, I knew I was grasping. I knew that Lauren would not have carried this for 10 years if it was just a misunderstanding. I knew that the pain in her voice had been too real, too raw, too specific. Still, I needed to hear it from my mother's own mouth. I made her breakfast that morning, scrambled eggs and toast, the way she likes it. I brought it to her on a tray and set it on the small table beside her chair. She thanked me without looking up from her Bible. I sat down on the edge of the bed and waited until she had finished eating. Then I said, "Mother, I need to ask you about something." She looked at me with those pale blue eyes, the ones that have always seemed to see right through me. She said, "What is it?" I took a breath. I said, "Lauren came to see me last night. She told me something that happened a long time ago. Something she said she told you about when she was 16. My mother's expression did not change. She just looked at me, waiting. I said, "She told me that someone in the family hurt her, and she said that when she came to you for help, you told her it was her fault." There was a long silence. My mother set down her fork. She folded her hands in her lap. And then she said, in that same calm, measured voice she had always used, "I do not know what you are talking about." I felt my chest tighten. I said, "Mother, please. I am not trying to fight with you. I just need to understand what happened." She shook her head. She said, "That girl has always been dramatic. She has always had an imagination. If she told you something like that, she is either confused or she is lying." I felt something crack inside me. I said, "Why would she lie about something like that?" My mother looked at me like I was a child who had asked a foolish question. She said, "Because she wants attention, because she wants to cause trouble, because she has never forgiven me for not letting her have her way all the time." I said, "She is 27 years old, Mother. She is not a child anymore, and she is not making this up." My mother's face hardened. She said, "If you believe her over me, then you are a fool. I have never done anything but try to hold this family together. I have sacrificed everything for you and your children. And this is how you repay me, by accusing me of something I did not do." I felt the familiar pull, the old instinct to back down, to apologize, to smooth things over. But this time, I did not. This time, I said, "I am not accusing you of anything. I am asking you to tell me the truth." She stood up. She said, "I have told you the truth. If you do not believe me, that is your problem, not mine." And she walked out of the room. I sat there on the bed, staring at the untouched toast on her tray, and I realized something. My mother was not going to admit what she had done. She was not going to apologize. She was not going to explain, because in her mind, she had done nothing wrong. In her mind, protecting the family meant protecting its reputation, no matter who got hurt in the process. And I realized something else. I had been doing the same thing. I had spent my whole life trying to keep the peace, trying to make everyone happy, trying to hold the family together. And in doing so, I had ignored the cracks. I had ignored the silence. I had ignored my own daughter's pain. I called Lauren that afternoon. I told her I had talked to my mother. I told her what she had said, and I told her for the first time in 10 years that I believed her. Lauren was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Thank you." That is all I needed to hear. We talked for over an hour. She told me more. Not everything, but enough. Enough for me to understand that what had happened was not a misunderstanding. It was not a miscommunication. It was a violation. And my mother's response had been a betrayal. Lauren said she had spent years in therapy trying to make sense of it, trying to understand why the person she had trusted had turned her away, trying to forgive herself for not being believed. She said she had finally reached a place where she could talk about it without falling apart. But that did not mean it did not still hurt. I asked her why she had not told me sooner. She said, "Because I was afraid you would choose her over me, and I could not have handled that." I felt like my heart was breaking. I said, "I am so sorry. I am so, so sorry." She said, "I know, Mom. I know." The days after that phone call felt like walking through fog. Everything looked the same on the surface, but nothing felt solid anymore. My mother still sat in her chair by the window. She still watched her programs. She still asked me what was for dinner, but I could not look at her the same way. Every time I brought her a cup of tea or helped her with her medications, I felt a tightness in my chest that would not go away. I started noticing things I had trained myself not to see. The way she spoke about Lauren when her name came up, always with a little edge, always with some small criticism wrapped in concern. Oh, Lauren always was so sensitive. Lauren never could take a joke. Lauren has always been difficult. I used to think those were just observations. Now I heard them for what they were. Dismissals. Ways of making sure no one took my daughter seriously. I also started remembering moments I had pushed aside. Little things that had not made sense at the time, but that I had not questioned, because questioning my mother was not something I did. I remembered the summer Lauren turned 17, right after whatever happened. She had asked if she could stay with Catherine in Oregon for a few weeks. My mother had said absolutely not. She had said Lauren needed to be home with family. She had said running away from problems never solved anything. At the time, I thought she was being wise. Now I understood she was making sure Lauren stayed where she could be watched, where she could be controlled. I remembered Lauren asking if she could see a counselor that same year. She had said she was feeling anxious. She had said she was having trouble sleeping. My mother had overheard the conversation and told me that therapy was for people who did not have faith. She said if Lauren was struggling, she needed to pray more and complain less. I had agreed with her. I had told Lauren to give it some time, that she was probably just stressed about college applications. I had sent my daughter back to her room with a pat on the shoulder and a suggestion to read her Bible. I cannot tell you how much I regret that now. I want to pause right here because this is something I need you to understand. Denial does not always look like refusing to believe something. Sometimes it looks like finding reasons not to ask the next question. Sometimes it looks like convincing yourself that everything is fine because facing the truth would be too hard. If you have ever looked back and realized you missed a sign because you were afraid of what you might find, write the word notice in the comments. Tell me where you are watching from tonight. And if this story is making you think about someone in your own life, someone who might be carrying something heavy, leave a like and share this with a friend who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you want to hear more tomorrow. I started keeping notes. I know that sounds strange, but I needed to write things down because my own mind kept trying to make excuses. I would remember something my mother had said or done, and immediately my brain would offer a softer interpretation. She did not mean it that way. She was just from a different generation. She was trying to protect the family. So I started writing it down in a little notebook I kept in my nightstand. Facts, dates, things Lauren had told me. Things I had observed, things my mother had said. I wrote down that Lauren had stopped coming to Sunday dinners in the fall of 2014. I wrote down that my mother had told me not to make a fuss about it. I wrote down that when I had asked Lauren if something was wrong, she had said she just needed space, and I had accepted that without digging deeper. I wrote down that Lauren had lost weight that year, that her grades had dropped, that she had stopped playing piano, something she had loved since she was 6 years old. I wrote down that when I mentioned these things to my mother, she had said Lauren was just being a teenager, that all girls go through phases, that I was worrying too much. I wrote down that after my mother moved in with me 4 years ago, Lauren had asked if she could talk to me somewhere, other than my house. I had thought it was odd, but I had not asked why. Now I knew. The notebook filled up quickly, and the more I wrote, the angrier I became. Not just at my mother, at myself, because I had been there. I had seen the signs. I had heard my daughter asking for help in every way except using the exact words, and I had chosen not to hear her. One afternoon, I called my son Michael in Virginia. I did not tell him everything, but I told him enough. I said that Lauren had shared something painful with me. I said that it involved our family. I said that Grandma Dorothy had known about it and had not handled it well. I asked him if he had ever noticed anything strange between Lauren and our mother. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Michael said, "Mom, I always thought Grandma was harder on Lauren than she was on the rest of us. I just figured it was because Lauren was the youngest, or because they had different personalities. But yeah, there was something. I remember one Christmas, Lauren must have been 15 or 16, and she was helping Grandma in the kitchen. I walked in to grab something, and Grandma was talking to her in this really cold voice. She was saying something about how Lauren needed to stop drawing so much attention to herself. I did not understand what she meant, and when I asked, Grandma just smiled and said it was girl talk. Lauren looked like she wanted to disappear. I felt sick. I asked Michael why he had never mentioned it before. He said, because it did not seem like a big deal at the time. And honestly, Mom, you always defended Grandma. If any of us said something negative about her, you would get upset. So we just stopped saying anything. He was right. I had defended her. I had made excuses for her my entire life, and in doing so, I had made it clear to my children that my mother's feelings mattered more than theirs. I talked to Catherine next. She was more direct. She said, "Mom, I love you, but you have always put Grandma on a pedestal, and the rest of us have had to work around that. Lauren had it the worst, because she is the one who stayed close to home. The rest of us got out. She did not." I asked her if Lauren had ever said anything to her about what happened. Catherine said, "Not in detail. But a few years ago, she told me she would never let her kids spend time alone with Grandma. She said there were things about Grandma that people did not see. I asked her what she meant, and she said she could not talk about it yet. I did not push. I figured she would tell me when she was ready. I just made sure she knew I believed her, whatever it was. I started crying. I said, "Why did no one tell me?" Catherine's voice was gentle but firm. She said, "Because you did not want to hear it, Mom. Every time any of us tried to tell you something you did not want to know, you shut it down. You have spent your whole life protecting Grandma's image, and we have spent our whole lives trying not to make you choose." That conversation broke something open in me. I realized that I had not just failed Lauren. I had failed all of my children by making it clear that the truth was less important than keeping up appearances. I need to stop here for a moment and speak directly to anyone listening who might be in a similar situation. If someone you love is trying to tell you something difficult, please do not make them work harder to be heard than the person who hurt them has to work to be defended. Please do not make them prove their pain. Please do not ask them to protect the feelings of the person who did not protect them. If you hear me, leave a like. If you know someone who needs to hear this, share it with them. Subscribe if you want to walk through another story with me tomorrow, because I am not done yet. That night, I sat down at my kitchen table and wrote a letter to Lauren. I did not send it. I just needed to get the words out. I told her I was sorry. I told her I believed her. I told her I should have seen what was happening, and I should have acted. I told her that I understood now why she had pulled away and that I did not blame her. I told her that I was going to make changes, that I was not going to pretend anymore, that she mattered more to me than any image I had been trying to protect. When I finished writing, I folded the letter and put it in my Bible right next to the photograph I had found. And I made a decision. I could not make my mother leave my home. She had nowhere else to go. But I could change the way I responded to her. I could stop making excuses. I could stop defending her to my children. I could stop pretending that everything was fine. The next morning, I told my mother that Lauren would be coming over that evening and that I expected her to be kind. My mother looked at me like I had said something absurd. She said, "I am always kind." I said, "No, Mother. You are polite. There is a difference." Her face went hard. She said, "I do not know what that girl has been telling you, but you are making a mistake." I said, "The only mistake I made was not listening to her sooner." My mother did not respond. She just turned back to her television and acted as if I had not spoken. But I saw the way her jaw tightened. I saw the way her hands gripped the armrests of her chair. She knew I was not backing down this time. Lauren came over that evening. I had told her my mother would be there, and I had asked if she was okay with that. She had said yes, as long as I was there too. When she arrived, she did not go into the living room where my mother was sitting. She stayed in the kitchen with me. We made dinner together, just the two of us, and for the first time in years, it felt easy. It felt safe. My mother came into the kitchen at one point to get a glass of water. She looked at Lauren. Lauren looked back. Neither of them said a word, but something passed between them, a recognition. My mother knew that I knew, and she knew that her power over this family was not what it used to be. After my mother went back to her room, Lauren turned to me and said, "Thank you for believing me." I said, "I should have believed you 10 years ago." She said, "You are believing me now. That is what matters." But I could see in her eyes that it was not enough. Belief was a starting point, not an ending point. There was still so much work to do, so much trust to rebuild, so many years of silence to undo. I asked her what she needed from me. She thought for a long time. Then she said, "I need you to stop pretending she is someone she is not. I need you to stop defending her when she says hurtful things. I need you to stop expecting me to forgive her just because she is old. And I need you to understand that I might never be able to sit in the same room with her and feel safe, and that has to be okay." I nodded. I said, "It is okay. Whatever you need, it is okay." We sat there at the table for a long time after that, not saying much, just being together. And I realized something I should have realized years ago. Love is not about keeping everyone comfortable. Love is about making sure the people who need protection actually get it. The weeks that followed were the hardest of my life. Not because anything dramatic happened, but because I had to sit with the weight of what I had learned and figure out what to do with it. I could not undo the past. I could not go back and protect Lauren the way she should have been protected. I could not erase the years she spent carrying something she should never have had to carry alone. But I could do something now. I could make sure that the rest of her life did not have to be shaped by the same silence that had defined the first part of it. I started by talking to my pastor. His name is Reverend Marcus Thompson, and he has been at Chapel Hill Community Church for nearly 20 years. He is a good man, thoughtful and careful, not the kind of pastor who offers easy answers or Bible verses like Band-Aids. I called him and asked if I could meet with him privately. He said yes, without hesitation. We met in his office on a Thursday afternoon. I did not tell him every detail, but I told him enough. I told him that my daughter had been hurt by someone in our family. I told him that another family member had known and had not helped. I told him that I was struggling to know what my responsibility was now, both to my daughter and to the person who had failed her. Reverend Thompson listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Helen, the first thing you need to understand is that protecting someone's reputation is not the same as protecting them. Your mother may be elderly, she may be family, but that does not mean her actions should be shielded from accountability. Your daughter deserves to be seen and believed. And part of seeing her is acknowledging that what happened to her was wrong and that the response she received was also wrong." I asked him what I should do. He said, "You cannot force your mother to admit what she did. You cannot force her to apologize. But you can make it clear that your daughter's well-being is your priority. You can set boundaries. You can make sure that your home is a place where truth is valued more than comfort. And you can get your daughter the support she needs, even if that support does not include reconciliation with your mother." He also said something I will never forget. He said sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to participate in their denial. Before I go any further, I want to say something to anyone who is listening and thinking about their own family. If someone you love has been hurt, you do not owe loyalty to the person who hurt them. You do not owe silence to the person who demanded it. You owe love and protection to the person who was harmed. If that is resonating with you right now, write the word protect in the comments. Tell me where you are watching from. Tell me what time it is. Let me know I am not alone in this. And if you have not already, please subscribe. There is a new story here every day, and I keep telling them because I believe they matter. I left that meeting feeling both lighter and heavier. Lighter because I finally had permission to stop pretending. Heavier because I knew what came next was not going to be easy. I went home and sat down with my mother. I told her that I had spoken with my pastor. I told her that I had thought a lot about what Lauren had said, and that I believed her. I told her that I did not expect her to admit what she had done, but that I needed her to understand that things were going to be different from now on. I said, Lauren is not required to spend time with you. She is not required to forgive you, and I am not going to pressure her to do either of those things. If she wants to come to this house, she should feel safe here. And that means I will not allow you to speak about her the way you have been. My mother stared at me like I had lost my mind. She said, You are choosing her over me. I said, I am choosing truth over silence. There is a difference. She said, I am your mother. I gave you life. I raised you. I sacrificed everything for you, and this is how you repay me. I felt the old pull, the guilt, the instinct to apologize and make everything okay again. But I took a breath and I said, I love you, Mother. But love does not mean I have to agree with everything you have done, and it does not mean I have to ignore the harm you have caused. She stood up. Her hands were shaking. She said, If you continue down this path, you are going to destroy this family. I said, This family was already broken. I am just finally willing to admit it. She did not speak to me for 3 days after that. She stayed in her room. She refused meals. She acted as if I had committed some unforgivable betrayal, and maybe, in her mind, I had. Because I had broken the unspoken rule that had governed our family for generations. I had chosen my child over my parent. I had chosen honesty over image. I had chosen protection over peace. On the 4th day, she came out of her room and sat down at the breakfast table like nothing had happened. She did not apologize. She did not acknowledge our conversation. She just asked what I was making for lunch. And I realized that this was how it was going to be. She was never going to admit what she had done. She was never going to say she was sorry. She was going to go to her grave believing that she had done nothing wrong. And I had to accept that. But accepting that she would not change did not mean I had to keep enabling her. I called Lauren and told her what had happened. I told her that I had set boundaries with my mother. I told her that I was not going to defend her anymore. I told her that I was sorry it had taken me so long. Lauren was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I did not think you would actually do it. I said, I should have done it 10 years ago. She said, You are doing it now. That is what matters. We talked for a while about what came next. Lauren said she had been seeing a therapist for the past few years, someone who specialized in family trauma. She said it had helped her understand that what happened was not her fault, that the way my mother had responded was not her fault, that my failure to see it was not her fault. She said she had spent a long time believing that if she had just been different, quieter, less pretty, less herself, then maybe none of it would have happened. But her therapist had helped her see that the problem was never her. The problem was the people who should have protected her and did not. I asked her if she would ever be willing to sit down with me and talk through everything, not just the broad strokes, but the details. She said maybe someday, but not yet. She said she needed to feel safe first. She said she needed to know that I would not try to minimize what happened or make excuses for anyone. She said she needed to know that I could handle the truth without falling apart. I told her I understood, and I told her that whenever she was ready, I would be there. In the meantime, I started doing my own work. I found a counselor, a woman named Dr. Patricia Hernandez, who worked with families dealing with difficult dynamics. I told her everything. I told her about my mother. I told her about Lauren. I told her about the years of silence and the guilt I was carrying. She listened without judgment, and then she said something that surprised me. She said, "You are grieving." I said, "Grieving what?" She said, The mother you thought you had, the family you thought you were part of, the version of yourself that you believed was a good mother. Grief is not just about death, it is about loss, and you have lost a lot. She was right. I was grieving. I was grieving the version of my mother I had carried in my head for 77 years, the woman who was strong and wise and always right, the woman who loved her family fiercely and would do anything to protect them. I was grieving the realization that that woman had never really existed, or if she had only existed for some of us, not for Lauren. I was also grieving the version of myself I had believed I was. The good daughter, the good mother, the woman who kept her family together. I had spent my whole life trying to be that person, and now I had to face the fact that in trying to hold everything together, I had let the most important thing slip through my fingers. I had let my daughter suffer in silence because I was more afraid of conflict than I was committed to truth. Dr. Hernandez helped me see that I could not change the past, but I could change the way I moved forward. She helped me see that boundaries were not punishments. They were protections. She helped me see that I did not have to choose between loving my mother and protecting my daughter. I could do both, but protecting my daughter had to come first. Thank you for walking through this with me. I know this is not easy to hear, but if you are still here, that tells me something. It tells me you care about truth. It tells me you care about people who have been hurt. It tells me you understand that families are complicated and that love sometimes means making hard choices. If this story is helping you see something in your own life more clearly, leave a like. If you know someone who needs to hear this, share it. And please, subscribe if you want to hear how this ends tomorrow. I am almost to the part where things start to shift, where healing, slow and painful as it is, finally begins. Over the next few months, I made changes. Small ones at first, then bigger ones. I stopped inviting my mother to family gatherings where Lauren would be present. I stopped expecting Lauren to call my mother on holidays. I stopped making excuses when my mother said something cruel or dismissive. When she would start in on one of her little comments about Lauren, I would say, "That is not true, and I am not going to discuss it." And then I would leave the room. It was not easy. My mother was furious. She accused me of being disrespectful. She accused me of turning my children against her. She told me I was going to regret this. But I did not back down. Because for the first time in my life, I understood that keeping the peace was not the same as doing what was right. I also started spending more time with Lauren. Real time. Not just polite visits where we talked about the weather and avoided anything meaningful. I asked her about her work. I asked her about her friends. I asked her what she needed from me. And slowly, carefully, she started letting me in. One Saturday afternoon, she came over and we sat on the porch with coffee. It was a warm day in late spring, and the magnolia tree in the yard was in full bloom. We sat there in silence for a while, just listening to the birds and watching the neighbors walk by. Then Lauren said, "I want to show you something." She pulled out her phone and opened a note. She said, "I have been keeping a list. Things I wish I had said to Grandma, things I wish I had said to you, things I wish someone had said to me. My therapist told me it might help to write them down, even if I never share them. But I think I want to share some of them with you now, if that is okay." I nodded. I said, "Of course." She started reading. Some of the things on the list were heartbreaking. I wish someone had told me it was not my fault. I wish someone had asked me if I was okay. I wish someone had noticed I stopped eating. I wish someone had believed me the first time. But some of the things on the list were also hopeful. I am proud of myself for surviving. I am learning to trust again. I am not ashamed anymore. I am finally telling the truth. When she finished reading, she looked at me and said, "I do not need you to fix this, Mom. I do not need you to go back in time and change what happened. I just need you to see me now. I need you to believe me now. I need you to choose me now." I reached across the table and took her hand. I said, "I see you, I believe you, and I choose you, every single day." She started crying, not the loud, desperate kind of crying, just quiet tears that slipped down her cheeks while she smiled. She said, "That is all I ever wanted." 2 years have passed since that night on the porch when Lauren first told me the truth. 2 years since my entire understanding of my family shifted beneath my feet like the ground during an earthquake. 2 years since I stopped pretending that silence was the same as love. And I want to tell you what has changed, what has stayed the same, and what I have learned in the time since then. My mother is still living with me. She is 96 years old now, and her health has declined in ways that make it impossible for her to live alone. She has trouble walking. Her memory comes and goes. Some days she knows exactly who I am and where she is. Other days she thinks I am her sister, or that we are still living in the house she grew up in back in Durham. On those days, I do not correct her. I just sit with her and let her talk about whatever world she is living in at that moment. She has never apologized to Lauren. She has never acknowledged what happened. She has never admitted that she failed in the one moment when my daughter needed her most, and I have had to accept that she never will. There are some people who will go to their graves believing they did nothing wrong, and my mother is one of them. That does not mean I excuse what she did. It does not mean I pretend it did not happen. It just means I have stopped waiting for her to become someone she is not. Lauren comes to visit me regularly now, but she does not come when my mother is in the common areas of the house. We have an arrangement. Lauren texts me when she is on her way, and I make sure my mother is in her room or outside on the back porch where they will not cross paths. It is not a perfect solution, but it is one that allows Lauren to have a relationship with me without having to sacrifice her own sense of safety. And that matters more to me than anything else. Some people in my family have criticized me for this. My brother called me a few months ago and said I was being too hard on our mother. He said she is an old woman who does not have much time left and that I should let the past stay in the past. He said Lauren should forgive and move on. I listened to him talk for a while, and then I said something I never would have said 2 years ago. I said, "You were not the one who was hurt. You do not get to decide when forgiveness happens or if it happens at all. And until you are willing to listen to Lauren's side of the story, I do not want to hear your opinion on how she should heal." He has not called me since, and I am okay with that, because I have learned that protecting my daughter means I will lose some relationships. It means some people will think I am being unreasonable or stubborn or disrespectful, and I have decided I can live with that. I want to pause here and talk directly to anyone who is listening and feeling torn between protecting someone who was hurt and keeping peace with someone who caused harm. You are not required to keep everyone happy. You are not required to make excuses for people just because they are family. You are not required to prioritize someone's reputation over someone else's healing. If you are struggling with this right now, write the word boundaries in the comments. Tell me where you are listening from. Tell me what time it is where you are. Let me know you are out there, because I promise you, you are not alone. And if this story is giving you the courage to make a hard choice, leave a like and share it with someone who might need to hear it too. Subscribe if you want to keep walking through these kinds of stories with me, because I am going to keep telling them as long as someone needs to hear them. Lauren is doing better now. Not perfect, not healed in the way people think healing is supposed to look, but better. She is still in therapy, and she says it has helped her understand that trauma does not just go away because you talk about it. It becomes part of your story, but it does not have to be the whole story. She has learned to set boundaries with people who make her feel unsafe. She has learned to recognize when someone is asking her to minimize her pain for their comfort. And she has learned to walk away from those situations without guilt. She has also started speaking more openly about what happened, not in detail, but in broad strokes. She volunteers with an organization that works with young women who have experienced family trauma. She says it helps her to be able to tell other girls that they are not alone, that it was not their fault, that the adults who failed them were wrong, that healing is possible, even when justice is not. I am so proud of her. Not because she has forgiven anyone, not because she has moved on in the way people expect, but because she has refused to let what happened to her define the rest of her life. She has refused to stay silent just to make other people comfortable. She has refused to carry shame that was never hers to carry in the first place. A few months ago, she told me she had started dating someone, a kind, patient man who works as a teacher at the same university where she works. She said she had been honest with him from the beginning about her past, about her family, about the work she is still doing to heal. And he had listened without judgment. He had not tried to fix her. He had not told her to forgive and forget. He had just said, "Thank you for trusting me with that." And then he had asked what she needed from him to feel safe. She said it was the first time in her life she had felt truly seen by someone outside of a therapist's office. The first time someone had responded to her truth with care instead of discomfort. And she said it made her realize how much she had been settling for in other relationships. How much she had been willing to accept crumbs of respect because she did not believe she deserved the whole meal. Hearing her say that broke my heart and put it back together at the same time. Because I realized she was talking about more than just romantic relationships. She was talking about family too. She was talking about me, about the years when I had given her crumbs of belief and called it love, about the years when I had asked her to settle for my discomfort instead of demanding that I rise to meet her pain. I told her I was sorry. Again, I will probably tell her I am sorry for the rest of my life, and it still will not be enough. But she smiled and said, "Mom, you are doing the work now. That is what matters. You did not stay stuck. You did not choose comfort over truth. You chose me. And that is more than a lot of people get." I have also done my own healing work over the past 2 years. I have stayed in counseling with Dr. Hernandez, and it has helped me understand patterns I did not even know I was repeating. Patterns of silence, patterns of conflict avoidance, patterns of prioritizing other people's feelings over my own needs. I grew up in a generation where women were taught that our value came from how well we kept everyone else happy. And I spent 77 years believing that was true. It has taken me 2 years of hard, painful work to start believing something different. Dr. Hernandez helped me see that I was not a bad mother. I was a mother who had been taught the wrong things about what love looks like. I had been taught that love meant never making waves, that love meant protecting the family image, that love meant forgiving without question and forgetting without processing. And I had passed those beliefs on to my children without even realizing it. But she also helped me see that I could choose differently now, that it was not too late to rewrite the story, that even at 79 years old, I could learn new ways of loving, better ways, braver ways. One of the biggest changes I have made is in how I talk to my other children. I have had honest conversations with Michael and Catherine about the ways I failed them too. The ways I prioritized keeping peace over hearing them. The ways I dismissed their concerns because those concerns threatened the version of reality I wanted to believe. Both of them have been gracious, more gracious than I deserve. But they have also been honest. And that honesty has been a gift, even when it hurt. Michael told me that he had always felt like he had to be the easy child because Lauren was struggling and Catherine was far away. He said he learned early that the way to get my approval was to not need anything, to not complain, to not make problems. And he said that pattern followed him into adulthood, into his marriage, into his friendships. He said he is working on it now, learning to ask for what he needs instead of just going along to keep the peace. But he said it would have been easier if I had taught him that his needs mattered when he was young. Catherine told me that she moved to Oregon partly because she could not stand the way our family operated. She said she loved me, but she could not breathe in a house where truth was treated like a threat. She said watching the way I bent myself into knots trying to keep my mother happy taught her that she never wanted to live like that. So she left. And she built a life 3,000 miles away where she could be honest without being punished for it. Hearing these things was painful, but it was also necessary because I needed to understand the full cost of the choices I made. I needed to see that my silence did not just hurt Lauren. It hurt all of my children. It taught them lessons I never meant to teach. It shaped them in ways I never intended. And I needed to take responsibility for that. Before I finish this story, I want to speak directly to the grandmothers, the mothers, the aunts, the sisters, anyone who has ever been in a position to protect someone and did not. Maybe you did not know. Maybe you did not want to know. Maybe you were scared. Maybe you were taught that keeping the family together was more important than keeping everyone safe. I understand. I have been there. But I am telling you now, it is never too late to choose differently. It is never too late to believe someone. It is never too late to say, I am sorry I did not see this sooner. It is never too late to stop making excuses and start making space for the truth. If you hear me saying this and something in your chest is telling you there is someone in your life you need to listen to more carefully, please listen to that feeling. Write the word listen in the comments. Tell me where you are watching from. And please, leave a like if this story has touched you. Share it with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe so you can hear another story tomorrow, because I am going to keep telling them. There is a moment I think about often now. It happened about 6 months ago. Lauren and I were sitting in my kitchen, drinking coffee and talking about nothing in particular. The window was open, and a breeze was moving through the room, carrying the smell of honeysuckle from the yard. My mother was outside on the back porch, sitting in the sun, and for just a moment, everything felt peaceful. Lauren looked out the window at my mother and said, "Do you think she even remembers what she did?" I said, "I do not know. Maybe. Maybe not." Lauren nodded. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I used to think that if she just apologized, everything would be okay. That if she just admitted she was wrong, I could forgive her and we could all move on. But I do not think that anymore." I asked her what changed. She said, "I realized that I do not need her apology to heal. I do not need her to validate my pain. I do not need her to admit what she did. I already know what happened. I already know it was wrong. And I do not need her permission to believe my own story." I felt tears in my eyes. I said, "You are so much stronger than I ever was." She shook her head. She said, "No, Mom. I am strong because you finally chose to be strong too. You could have kept protecting her. You could have kept pretending. But you did not. And that gave me permission to stop pretending too." We sat there together in the quiet, and I thought about the photograph I had found 2 years ago, the one tucked inside my mother's Bible. I had asked my mother about it once, why she had kept it, why she had written that date on the back. She had looked at me with blank eyes and said she did not remember. Maybe that was true. Maybe it was not. But it did not matter anymore, because the photograph was not the story. The date was not the story. The story was what happened after. The story was what I chose to do once I finally knew the truth. I still have that photograph. I keep it in my own Bible now, not as a reminder of what my mother did, but as a reminder of what I almost missed. I almost missed my daughter. I almost missed the truth. I almost chose silence over love. But I did not. And that is the story I want to tell. If you have stayed with me until the end, I want you to know you gave this old woman the gift of being heard. Leave a like if this story gave you something to think about. Subscribe if you want another story tomorrow. And if you truly listened, write the word "seen" in the comments. Not because everything in life is easy, but because being seen is where healing begins. Tell me where you are watching from and what time it is there. From my heart to yours, take care of the people who trust you. Pay attention to the quiet ones. Believe the ones who are brave enough to speak. And never ever choose protecting an image over protecting a person. The final lesson I want to leave you with is this. Family loyalty is not the same as family love. Loyalty asks you to stay silent. Love asks you to stay present. Loyalty asks you to protect reputations. Love asks you to protect people. Loyalty asks you to forgive without accountability. Love asks you to create safety first and then see what forgiveness might look like after that. For most of my life, I confused the two. I thought being a good daughter, a good mother, a good woman meant keeping everyone happy and keeping everything quiet. But I was wrong. Being a good mother means listening even when the truth is uncomfortable. It means believing even when belief costs you something. It means choosing your child over your pride, over your comfort, over your need to pretend everything is fine. I cannot give you back the years I lost. I cannot undo the harm that was done. But I can tell you this. It is never too late to start listening. It is never too late to start believing. It is never too late to choose love over loyalty. And it is never too late to say, I see you. I believe you. And I am here. That is the story I needed to tell. That is the truth I needed to share. And if even one person hears this and decides to listen a little more carefully to someone they love, then it was worth it. Thank you for walking through this with me. Thank you for staying until the end. And please, if someone in your life is trying to tell you something, do not make them prove it. Do not make them beg. Just listen. Just believe. Just choose them. Because that is what love actually looks like.